Okay, we have another week of college football in the books. And yeah, there's a lot to go ahead and talk about, so we're going to get right into it. This is my recap of week 4 and all of the games that happened, starting out with the games that I made predictions with for in my last video, starting out with the Thursday game, Illinois at Nebraska. This is going to start off with the whiff. Nebraska did fall to Illinois in overtime. I did pick Nebraska to win this game. Luke Altmaier continues his streak without interception this season. Not something I expected from him. And he also only threw 6 incompletions in this game, going 21 for 27. I thought Nebraska's defense would be able to force Illinois into being more one-dimensional, but that wasn't really the case. In fact, quite the opposite happened. The ball was spread out fairly effectively for Illinois through the air and on the ground. I thought Nebraska would be the more physical team, but that was also not the case. Illinois' defense recorded 5 sacks and allowed Nebraska less than 50 rushing yards. Meanwhile, Nebraska's defense only recorded 2 sacks and allowed Illinois to rack up 166 yards on the ground. Nebraska's defense was definitely not bad by any means, but they were certainly not the story of the game that I thought they would be. Nebraska even won the turnover battle in this game, and they had more passing yards as well. Which was mildly impressive, to be honest, considering how Illinois' strength is probably their secondary, at least on defense. But elsewhere, Illinois won the stat sheet. More importantly, though, they won the big moments of the game. Illinois looked like the better team. Nebraska still looks a heck of a lot better than they were last year. Dylan Raiola, I think, is going to be a really solid quarterback for them. He did throw an interception, but yeah, he still looks really solid. And remember, he's still a freshman, so the best football he has is still ahead of him, I believe. Congrats to Illinois, though. It's a big win for them. Obviously, they're better than I expected them to be. Nebraska, maybe not as good as I expected them to be, but I definitely think that this team is going to be going to a bowl game. So keep your heads up. I think it'll be a better season this year than it was last year and the years before. So definitely still a lot to be excited about if you are a Nebraska fan. Next up, North Carolina at Clemson. North Carolina State is one of the biggest disappointments of the year, right up there with Florida State. A complete body bagging by Clemson in this game, as I expected it would be. Obviously, North Carolina State did have their quarterback injured, but I don't really think it would have made much of a difference in this game. North Carolina State just isn't good. As for Clemson, they are really putting that Georgia game behind them. They've looked dynamite ever since. You may look at that final score and think Clemson, they had a great day on offense, but they were not so great on defense. But you would be wrong. 21 of North Carolina State's points came in the fourth quarter when this game had already been decided, so you can call it garbage time. Until then, North Carolina State had only scored twice on offense. Clemson seems to have something figured out here. The explosivity is there. Cade Klubnik is firing on all cylinders. It looks like they may have several high-end wide receivers to throw the ball to, and they have Phil Maffa in the backfield, so that's not too shabby either. Not much else to say. Clemson dominated this game. It was never close. North Carolina State is a bad football team. Clemson may be a very good football team, so that decided the game. Next, Florida at Mississippi State. I said in my preview video that this game may be some of the worst football played all season. I was not quite that. That honor goes to another game that I'll talk a little bit about later. But that being said, this game definitely still wasn't pretty. It was pretty ugly, actually, and both teams looked far from impressive. That being said, this game went exactly as I figured it would and as I said it would. We know Florida is bad, but Mississippi State is obviously much worse. When I saw Mississippi State get blown out by Toledo, I knew that no matter how bad Florida looked against Miami and Texas A&M, their floor was at least better than Mississippi State's ceiling. If you are a Florida fan, I know you guys can get a bit crazy. Don't let this game give you too much hope. Yes, your quarterbacks did play well in this game, but this was predominantly a screen and short pass type of game, which will not work on much better defenses, especially or any other half-decent teams, to be honest. I think Mississippi State proved that they are the worst team in the SEC, and I don't think it's really close. They lost Blake Shapen in this game. I don't know his status or if he's coming back soon, but this could be really bad news for them as he's probably the best player they have to lean on. Florida looked pretty pedestrian to me, pretty much exactly how I thought they would look. and the same team I thought they were the whole time. I still don't think there are many wins on the schedule for Florida, so take this one and enjoy it because I don't think there are too many more to come. Next, Kansas at West Virginia. Finally, West Virginia did not let me down on a prediction. They won this game. It looked rough for a second, but they did come out on top, and they delivered another very, very exciting and fun game to watch. I feel like we got better quarterback play from West Virginia and Garrett Green than we did Jalen Daniels, which is kind of a crazy thing to say considering how good Jalen Daniels has been. And for some reason, even though he is healthy, he has not looked as high quality as what we had seen from him in the past. I think that's because of an offensive coordinator change, but I thought that the identity of this West Virginia team would be dynamic, but most of the work would be on the ground, and that's not really what we saw in this game. Kansas actually outrushed West Virginia by almost 100 yards. West Virginia's leading rusher was the quarterback, but West Virginia was more successful through the air in this game. Last week they were up by 10 in the fourth quarter, and then ended up losing the game. This week, they were down by 11 late in the quarter, and they never gave up, and they were able to come back. The story of this game was really the Mountaineers quarterback, Garrett Green. Yes, he only had 50% completion percentage, but he made a big play every time he was needed. Every time the team really needed a big play, he provided, whether it was through the air or on the ground. He made some really big things happen in this game in the big moments, and that's what won West Virginia this game. Like I said last week, this would be a very close game and a game that West Virginia squeezes out, and that is exactly what happened. Another game I whiffed on, though, USC at Michigan. And while I did whiff on the game, I'm not really surprised to see the outcome. This is a game where I feel like the better team did lose, but after seeing what I saw, I think I would pick Michigan to win again if these two teams met up. And that's just because I think that while USC may be a better team, I think that Michigan is a matchup nightmare for USC given what I saw. That line of scrimmage matchup just gave them a huge edge in this game. Michigan's identity is pretty clear at this point. They are terrible at passing the ball, but they are still very physical up front. They can kill you on the ground, and they have a very, very solid defense. Michigan threw for 32 total passing yards in this game, and they won. Insane. Michigan knows who they are, and they are perfectly okay with playing to that strength no matter how one-dimensional it makes them. That's why they ended up switching to Alex Orji, because he gives them more running options, because they know that they are not a passing team, and he's definitely not a passing quarterback. It's much more clear to me now why this game looks so different to me than the Texas game did, because Texas matched and exceeded Michigan's physicality. Any team that can do that has a very good shot at making Michigan look bad, because if you can plug up that run game and match physicality at the line of scrimmage, Michigan will have a really hard time scoring. USC does not have that, though. What they do have is a very high-quality quarterback. They have playmakers all over the offense, and they have a defense that is much improved from what it was last year. That's undeniable. Against most teams, that'll win you games. But against a team with this specific profile, I think it's just a bad matchup. And I see a lot of people criticizing Miller Moss, and I don't really know why. I don't know what game you are watching. But when you see him on the ground taking hit after hit because USC's offensive line is just obviously outmatched by Michigan's defense, that he literally has no time to get the ball off, that I don't blame him, especially since he gave USC a lead very late in the fourth quarter and gave them a real shot to win despite those vulnerabilities. I don't think that you guys realize that this game was one or two plays away from being a USC win, being mismatched in physicality and still pulling off this game. One big Michigan run getting stopped on, or a 4th and goal getting stopped at the end of the game. This game goes to USC. And the tone is entirely different, and the talk is entirely different about these two teams. That one play or two plays does not define how good or bad USC or how good or bad Michigan is. I don't think any less of USC because of this game, and I don't think much different of Michigan either. I do think that Michigan showed that they can win big games, though, which is important, which I'll talk about in a second. But sometimes games like this happen where a team's strength can target their opponent's weaknesses and lead them to winning a game that they may not be the better team in. That's what I think happened in another game I'll talk about later. I'll say this. I'm still very impressed with USC this season. I don't think they are a championship contender, but they are most certainly a Big Ten contender still. And they don't play Ohio State. They don't play Oregon. So they could easily fit into that picture. As for Michigan, I do still have my doubts, but they showed off that they can win big games, like I said, which is much needed for that team and for that staff, both for this year and for recruiting going forward. Next, I have UCLA at LSU, and this game was admittedly more close than I expected, but in the end, my prediction did come true. LSU did win the game. I never thought that they would lose the game, but it was a lot closer than I expected. I saw some of the same weaknesses I have been seeing in LSU since week one. Their ground game is obviously not what they expected it to be. Defensively, there are still concerns, especially in the secondary. They're giving up chunk plays, and that definitely concerns me. But they do have a great quarterback in Garrett Nussmeier, and the offense is very effective through the air. Their defense, while concerning in the secondary, is definitely much better than they used to be, much like USC. They racked up 5 sacks and held UCLA to 14 rushing yards on 22 attempts. Essentially, LSU looks like what I expected them to be and what I said they would be in the preseason. Better on defense, worse on offense. As for UCLA, I don't even really need to discuss them much. They performed better than they had up to this point, but they are clearly not going to go very far. Next, I have Georgia Tech at Louisville, and we finally have seen Louisville play a real team, and they performed exactly as I predicted them to. They won the game. I told y'all it would be a closer game than many people made it out to be. The score does look like a wider gap, but it was a very close game late in this game. I told y'all I was worried about Georgia Tech's ability to stop the pass game for Louisville, and that was the area that Louisville found the most offensive success. They were able to make explosive plays and pass effectively on Georgia Tech's defense. They did struggle to get anything really going on the ground in this game, but defense was also a strength for this team, which is an area I thought would be the most concerning in the preseason. They did allow Georgia Tech to throw over 300 yards of passing yards. So the secondary is obviously still a point of concern, but the run defense held Georgia Tech's high-octane rushing game to less than 100 yards on the ground. As for Georgia Tech, the game was well within reach, but mistakes and miscues really cost them this game. Outside of the ground game, Georgia Tech did find a lot of success in this game. They had more total yards, more through the air and on the ground, actually. They had less penalties, and they had more time of possession. Haynes King played very well, as he has the past few weeks, but they had a field goal blocked for a touchdown, and a backwards pass blocked also ended up being a touchdown for Louisville. Overall, I think Georgia Tech actually played a better game, but mistakes did end up killing them in this game. So when I was talking about the Florida-Mississippi State game, I mentioned that there was another game that could be considered the worst football played all season, and that was this game I was referring to. It was pure chaos, 7 turnovers in this game. Both teams looked like they were actively trying to lose the game. The ball would get intercepted by one team, and then it would get intercepted the next play right back by the other team. It was ugly, it was gross, it was awful. Arkansas did come out on top, which is what I predicted, and I mentioned that this game could have a variety of outcomes in my preview. And yeah, I think I was right. This game definitely had a lot of times where it could have gone either way. This game switched momentum like every 10 seconds. Both teams were as inconsistent as I predicted. But Arkansas was the less messy team. They won the turnover battle, throwing 2 interceptions while Auburn turned the ball over 5 times. Taylor Green definitely wasn't successful through the air, but he performed great on the ground, especially in combination with Jaquindon Jackson, like I expected. Auburn did get Jarquez Hunter on the ground going a bit, but neither team was really super effective running the ball. Arkansas was just better. On the Auburn side, they just don't have a quarterback. You can't win games with 5 turnovers, especially with 4 of them being interceptions. They have some pieces there. They have some good pieces, but they just aren't a good team, not this year. They don't have the answers at quarterback no matter who they put back there, so they will not be a good team this year. Next is a game I was wrong about, Utah at Oklahoma State, and boy, I definitely did whiff this one. I picked Oklahoma State to win this game, and that was when I thought Cam Rising was the starter and was healthy, but he wasn't, and Utah came out and won outright anyways. To be honest, Utah controlled this game. It got dicey at the end, but Utah did what they do best. They went into another team's building and won a game being the more disciplined and more physical team. And I keep thinking Ollie Gordon is going to go off in one of these games, have a breakout game, because he has shown in the past that he is so good and that offensive line is so experienced, but he just hasn't been able to go off. That offensive line for Oklahoma State just hasn't been able to block well for him. And I really don't know what's going on there. Oklahoma State had to rely on Alan Bowman again, and I knew that if they kept that going, turnovers would follow. Yes, Bowman is playing a lot better than he has in the past, and his ball security issues are definitely minimized, but those tendencies tend to show their head again, especially when you throw the ball 33 times. But that is only a part of the puzzle. Turnovers were definitely not the backbreaker of this game. In fact, Utah threw just as many interceptions in the game, and Oklahoma State ended up winning the turnover battle. So I would not consider turnovers to be the reason that Oklahoma State lost. It was mostly just the fact that they couldn't run the ball, and that really did kill them. Alan Bowman did as well as he could with what he was given. 48 rushing yards with Ollie Gordon and that offensive line, 48 rushing yards. Oklahoma State had half of the first downs that Utah had. They had the ball less than half the time that Utah did. Utah's time of possession, 42 and a half minutes. Oklahoma State's 17 and a half minutes. Oklahoma State is just not as good as I thought they would be, because the strengths that I thought that they had are just not their strengths. And so now I don't know what to really expect from them. I do not think they will be the Big 12 championship team anymore. I'm still waiting to see what I think that game is going to look like. Next, I have Tennessee at Oklahoma. My prediction for this game was so accurate that it was almost like I wrote the script for it. Tennessee dominated this game. This team could very well win a national championship. Not that they will, but they very well could. This game was a blowout. Don't let anyone tell you differently. I know it looks like a 10-point game, but there was never a doubt who would win this game, and that was clear almost immediately. Tennessee could run up the score if they really wanted to, but they didn't. Tennessee showed that they are elite at almost every single area on the field, both the tangibles and the intangibles. We all know that Josh Heupel can put together a high-scoring offense. They have the quarterback play always. They have the running game, the explosivity, yada, yada, yada. They have had all of that in the past, though, but this year, what they have that they didn't have is what looks to be an elite defense, and they have the intangibles. I told you in my preview that there was concern out there for some in this game that Tennessee would show us what they have shown us in the past, that they would dominate inferior teams and gather a ton of hype and then crumble when they played quality teams. But I responded to that with 2 points, both which I think are true after watching this game. One, Tennessee is just wired differently this year. They will be in every single game that they play. And I said that in my last video. And two, even if they are the same old Tennessee, which they aren't, I don't think Oklahoma would be good enough to be the team to expose that. And I still believe that. So I still think that this point is not yet decided, because I really don't think Oklahoma is as good of a team as everyone had been expecting them to be. So let's talk about the defense. Oklahoma was held to 36 yards on the ground, 1.1 yard per carry. Held to 98 yards total through 3 quarters at home. And if you look at the drive chart for Oklahoma, it is just disgusting. A ton of 3 and outs, a safety, several fumbles. I mentioned the first 3 quarters because the fourth quarter got into garbage time, and Tennessee kind of let off the gas a little bit. Oklahoma throwing anything they could against the wall and seeing what sticks. Tennessee's defense went into Norman and shut down Oklahoma. That's what happened. So much so that Oklahoma had to bench their starting quarterback to try something new because they had no answers. And I'll get to Oklahoma and their quarterback in just a second. You know how I mentioned how bad that offensive line was for Oklahoma in my preview for this game, and how I thought that Tennessee's defensive line was going to be a really bad matchup for them, and Tennessee would take full advantage of that edge. Yeah, 3 sacks, 11 tackles for loss, and a partridge and a pear tree. It was not a good day for Oklahoma's offensive line. Do I need to go over Tennessee's offense? Probably not. They look perfectly equipped to play the type of ball conducive to winning in this game, and that's all I really need to say. As for Oklahoma, you have a real problem on your hands. Jackson Arnold, not it. The guy that you entrusted with the future of the program, the guy that pushed out Dillon Gabriel, a possible Heisman contender, and it seems like panic mode now. Because losing this game is one thing. We expected that. I expected that. But seeing the foundation of your team, of your offense, be completely and utterly inadequate, that's just a harder pill to swallow. And Jackson Arnold, like I said, he got benched in this game. In the middle of this game, after going 7 for 16 for 54 yards and an interception with no touchdowns. That cannot happen in Oklahoma. That's 3.4 yards per completion. Absolutely unacceptable. And the guy that came in, Michael Hawkins, will be the starter in my eyes going forward. I think that has to be the answer. Can he turn Oklahoma's offense around? I doubt it. He looked better than Arnold, but didn't really look spectacular to me. It's just weird to me seeing a Oklahoma team whose strength is defense and his weakness is offense. Because make no mistake, Oklahoma's defense did play well. They got 3 sacks of their own, 9 tackles for loss, and they held the high-powered Tennessee offense to just 25 points. Now, that could very well be, like I said earlier, because Tennessee decided to play a style of ball in this game that was safer and conducive to less scoring because they knew they didn't have to light up the scoreboard to win this game, but still, it's worth pointing out. But Oklahoma has a real offense problem, and that's not a revelation I made in just this game. I said it before this game, and it's part of the reason that I picked Tulane to beat Oklahoma. Before that, obviously that didn't happen, but Oklahoma's offense will not win them games. Their defense may give Oklahoma time to win games, but they can't go into bigger games on their schedule and win that way. I don't believe that they can. So now for the games that I made predictions for on the socials, but not in the video. These are going to go by a little bit quicker, more of a speed round type of deal, because I didn't really break them down in the last video, so I'm not going to break them down much here. First, Houston at Cincinnati. Pretty easy to see coming. I got this one right. Cincinnati has looked pretty average in the first few games of this season, while Houston has looked bad. Average is better than bad. And the big edge here was offense. I think that Houston looked awful offensively. This was a shutout win for the Bearcats. They were able to hold that offense to no points. I did expect it to be a little bit closer, but since he clamped Houston up on defense and was able to score efficiently. And simple as that. Next, I have Vanderbilt at Missouri. Obviously, I picked Missouri to win this game, and that is what happened. But, man, was this a close game. This game went into overtime where Missouri eventually won the game, but it was really close and it was really rough for Missouri. Vanderbilt would not have missed a field goal in overtime. Who knows what the outcome of this game would have been. Vanderbilt didn't play that amazing of a game either. It was pretty standard, to be honest with you. Missouri, their defense let up 27 points to Vanderbilt. Missouri did outplay Vanderbilt throughout the game, but 3 missed field goals for the Tigers almost cost them. Their offense looked a little bit shaky. Brady Cook was missing wide open throws and just didn't look like he normally does, especially when you take into consideration how good he was last year. Vanderbilt, definitely better than they've been in the past. Diego Pavia is a quarterback that is really working for Vanderbilt, really solid for them. Missouri may not be quite as good as I thought that they were. I will likely drop them a bit in my rankings, but I also think that Vanderbilt is better than a lot of people expected, myself included. I did see the potential there, but I did not think it would be realized to the degree that it was. Next, I have Cal at Florida State, and man, am I glad to be wrong about this one. I need to pick Florida State to lose more often because maybe they're going to pull out more wins if I do. While they did beat Cal, they by no means look like a good team all of a sudden. They did play better this game than they did in the past few games, but my stance still remains. DJ Uyunglele is just not the guy. He was terrible again in this game. The offensive line still can't block. The rushing game is nowhere close to where it needs to be. And the defense, however, seems to be rounding up into a much better unit. Kind of similar to what I expected them to be earlier or throughout the whole season. I did see some flashes of potential in the running game, and the receivers were catching more passes. So Florida State is improving. They have not mailed in the season yet. They are still a bad team, though, and they have a ton of weaknesses. Maybe this win will motivate them. They really did need it, but their schedule only gets harder from here, and I still think bowl game aspirations are probably out of reach. Not much to say as far as the Cal side goes. They outplayed Florida State for the most part. In fact, offensively, they definitely outplayed Florida State. They had significantly more passing yards and total yards, but the offensive line did not match up well against Florida State's defensive line, allowing 7 sacks and 12 tackles for loss. Red zone defense also did not allow a touchdown, so defense won this game for Florida State, no question. Next, I have Iowa at Minnesota, and as I expected, Iowa did win this game. They did it by scoring touchdowns, which is crazy for Iowa, I know. Iowa continues to confirm my prediction that I made for them in the preseason, that they are better on offense and a little worse on defense. Iowa scored 31 points in this game. 31, that's crazy for Iowa. Like I said, that's the most Minnesota has been scored on all year. Granted, they may not have been playing very quality teams, but still I think it's crazy to think about. Minnesota has a pretty solid defense too, so it's definitely impressive for an Iowa team to go in there and score 31. Last year, they scored more than 30 points only one time, and it was against Western Michigan. They've already done it 3 times this year, and they've only played 4 games. I will say, though, their offense has not been great. Their offense has not been great through the air, and that was no different in this game, but they did take over the game on the ground. Defensively, this was obviously a solid showing for Iowa as well. They're still really, really strong on that front. Iowa's defense may not be what they used to be, but they shut out the opponent in 3 out of 4 quarters, which will usually get you the win. Minnesota has a really rough stretch ahead as well. I don't see a bowl game in their future. Iowa definitely looks like they could make some noise in the Big Ten, but I don't expect them to be a Big Ten contender either. But yeah, offense is looking a lot better. Michigan State at Boston College, another one I got right. For one, it was not only a home game for Boston College, but it was also their bandana game. Up to this point, I saw Boston College handle Florida State and play a very close game with the Missouri team I thought was pretty dang solid. So while I have very outwardly not been a fan of the Bill O'Brien hire in the preseason, it's hard to deny that they have improved since last season. And Michigan State, on the other hand, had not impressed me up to this point. They played a 1-score game with FAU, and their quarterback has had a bit of an interception problem. They did take down Maryland, which made me have a bit more faith in them, but I felt like Boston College would just be a bit better. Turnovers were the deciding factor in this game, and I'm sure that the bandana game at home did not hurt either. Next, I have Baylor at Colorado, and what a game. Colorado remains one of the most entertaining teams in the country. Another incredible ending. Most people I knew picked Baylor in this game, and the game definitely looked like it was headed in that direction late in the fourth quarter, but Deion Sanders had my back, made sure that my prediction came through on this game. In case you didn't watch this game, you really should go back and watch it. It's an incredibly fun and entertaining game to watch, but I will give you a recap here. Baylor was up 7 late in the fourth quarter. They made it into field goal range to kick the game-winning field goal. They missed that field goal. Colorado does not have much time, though. Colorado moves the ball down the field, gets to midfield, 11 seconds left. Shedeur Sanders heaves a ball to the end zone, drops it right into the chest of the receiver, but the receiver does not catch it. 2 seconds on the clock. Shedeur rolls out, heaves another one deep into the end zone, into double or even triple coverage, I think. Caught, tied, overtime. Colorado strikes first in overtime. Baylor gets their shot. The Baylor player runs it in to the end zone, fumbles the ball on the 1-yard line through the back of the end zone. Fans rush the field, but they have to review the play. Definitely fumble, though. Colorado wins in overtime. That's the game. I'm not going to dive into the stats or break down this game any further. That's really all you need is what I just said. Shedeur is an incredible quarterback. Travis Hunter is an incredible receiver. We have known that since the beginning, and that has not changed in this game especially. Offense still struggles to block. Colorado still doesn't have a run game to speak of. They're better on defense, still not great. They will be better than they were last year. They may get 1 or 2 more wins, maybe go to a bowl game, but as a team, Colorado is still mediocre, and Baylor is the same, but they put on a show in this game. Purdue at Oregon State, I got this game right as well. The only real game I had seen Purdue play in before this game was against Notre Dame when they got beat 66-7, and that's a Notre Dame team that lost to Northern Illinois the week before. Oregon State may not be that great this year either. They did get blown out the week before as well, but I figured that they were better than that, and I was right. I had Purdue almost last in my Big Ten preseason rankings, and I definitely don't think I'll be changing that opinion anytime soon. Oregon State is just pretty middle of the road for where they're at. Northwestern at Washington, I was right about Washington too. I think that they took down Northwestern in what I feel like it has to be one of the most interesting scores I've ever seen. Northwestern scored 5 points. Northwestern had pretty abysmal quarterback play in this game, while Will Rogers looked pretty solid at Washington. Washington is by no means the team that they were last year, but they are still about middle of the road in the Big Ten, while Northwestern is definitely towards the back of the pack. Stanford at Syracuse. Stanford definitely did surprise me in this game, and I'm starting to think that Stanford may be better than I projected them to be. They played a nail-biter against TCU, and now they have taken down Syracuse, who look like they may have had a path to the ACC championship. Maybe they still do, but I'm not seeing it from here on. And this was at Syracuse's place. This was at home for Syracuse. Stanford had to fly across the country to play this game. Stanford's defense held Syracuse to 26 yards on the ground, forcing Syracuse to be very one-dimensional in this game. And to be honest, Syracuse was pretty successful even while they were one-dimensional. They passed the ball pretty well other than the 2 interceptions, but Stanford looked like a more balanced offense. Basically, Stanford is probably closer to a mid-tier ACC team rather than a bottom-tier one, and Syracuse is probably around that same ballpark. But yeah, I got this one wrong. I did not get this next one wrong, though. Rutgers at Virginia Tech. These are 2 teams that I called sneaky teams in their respective conferences in the preseason, but Virginia Tech had not lived up to that in their earlier games, especially in their loss to Vanderbilt to start the year. Prior to this game, Rutgers had not really faced any quality opponents, but they looked really good in the games that they played, and I picked them because I had faith that what I felt about them in the preseason was going to be true. They'd given me no reason to feel otherwise, and they proved me right. This was a big win for them, especially since Virginia Tech had to come back to make the score even look close. Tech is obviously not where they want to be right now. But I still don't think that they're too far off from being a conference contender maybe in the coming years. I don't think Rutgers is going to compete for the Big Ten or anything like that, either given how top-heavy the conference is, but they could definitely be in the upper half of the Big Ten and play spoiler to some bigger teams, so that's definitely better than what they have been in the past. As for Arizona, Texas Tech, it's another game that I got right. If this game had happened just a week earlier, I probably would have picked Arizona State. Texas Tech really struggled in the beginning of the year, but they definitely found something that clicks recently. They're not a good team or anything, but they're at least better than the team that they were when they almost lost to an FCS school in overtime. As far as the Big 12 opponents go, Arizona State is definitely far from the hardest team to play. Arizona State, while perfect until this game as far as wins and losses, they didn't really impress me. They had to struggle to beat Texas State, and I wasn't sure if their weakness was going to be able to be fixed by the next week. Meanwhile, Texas Tech went from scoring less than 20 points in 1 week to scoring almost 70 the next. Sure, it was a non-power conference team, but so is Texas State. It just looked to me like Texas Tech was improving while Arizona State's weaknesses were getting just more glaring. Still plenty of weaknesses on both sides, though. Next, I have Kansas State at BYU, and I was wrong about this one. I still believe Kansas State is the better team, but they definitely weren't on Saturday. Turnovers were the name of the game. Here, 3 for Kansas State. Score definitely looked ugly, and it was. But when you watch the game and you look at the stats, it can be really confusing because Kansas State actually played better in almost every single category, but they just couldn't make it to the end zone and they couldn't stop turning the ball over. I still have really high hopes for Kansas State. In fact, I think they're going to perform very well next week. Just to give you a little hint of my prediction for next week's game that they have. But BYU was able to take advantage of Kansas State's mistakes and turn this game into a blowout. Also, BYU may just be a little bit better than I expected them to be or than I gave them credit for. Beating Kansas State and SMU is definitely pretty impressive. And speaking of SMU, they're in the next game. SMU taking on TCU at home. I whiffed on this one. I picked TCU to win. Apparently, SMU is quietly rounding into the team I expected them to be in the preseason rather than the team I thought they were a few games into the season. I had not been impressed in the game I saw against BYU. They didn't have quarterback figured out. Offensive line was leaky. They just looked flat offensively overall. They definitely didn't look flat in this game, putting up 66 points against TCU. They have figured out the quarterback situation. Jennings is the starter, and he played like one. Defensively, SMU has a bit to be desired, obviously, but they can sure score. I picked TCU in this game, like I said, confidently. They played some very close games, but I liked what I saw from their quarterback and their team as a whole. And sure, there were weaknesses, but I didn't think SMU could exploit those. I was wrong. This was SMU's game from start to finish. TCU did make the score look a little bit more respectable towards the end of this game, but it wasn't close. I still think TCU has some fight left in them, and I think that they have potential to pull off some shocking wins. But the last two losses have definitely been heartbreaking for them. SMU may be off to the races, back in the conversation for the ACC, but I still think that conference is probably Clemson and Miami's conference. They are the clear favorites as of now. Now I'm going to get into some upsets. How about the Dukes owning the Tar Heels? That's right, James Madison at North Carolina. Did not see that one coming. James Madison put up 70 points against North Carolina. 70. Most schools don't even do that to their FCS schools. They went from 13 points against Gardner-Webb to 70 to an undefeated North Carolina team. Just embarrassing. I knew that North Carolina had a rough defense, but this is a whole different level. North Carolina turned the ball over 5 times, just stunned by this result. James Madison decided to put their name in the hat for that G5 auto bid spot in the playoffs, and a few other teams decided to take their names out of that hat. Northern Illinois being one of them. They went from beating Notre Dame to losing at home in overtime to Buffalo, not breaking this one down, but that may taint their chances or even ruin their chances. Memphis went from beating Florida State and Troy by multiple scores to getting beat soundly by Navy. Sure, Florida State isn't great, but come on, this probably tarnishes their chances at that G5 auto bid as well. But there's still plenty of ball to be played, so either of these teams can definitely bounce back. As for the teams that won but looked rough doing it, Bowling Green at Texas A&M, and you have to really feel bad for Bowling Green at this point. They have been in a close game with Penn State and A&M and just can't close it out. I still think Marcel Reed is the guy there at Texas A&M for quarterback. Bowling Green may just actually be a really decent G5 school this year, and the close games probably maybe less of an indictment on the power teams and more of a pat on the back to Bowling Green. Only time will tell. San Jose State at Washington. Washington State forgot to play defense. San Jose State was just in an absolute shootout up there with them. They may be another G5 school that could be pretty good this year. They've looked pretty good up to this point, and they could definitely pass the ball over there. So definitely not a good look for Washington State, especially on defense, but that also could be partially due to San Jose State being better than we think. But that's the video, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed. Please like, comment, subscribe. Follow me on the socials. Hope you guys have a great day or night whenever you're watching this. So, yeah. Peace.